Sometimes when you're driving down the road all by yourself, you begin to hear a voice that tells you need to look around, pay attention, maybe something isn't quite right. That voice is me. It's the voice of Gord.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Voice of Gord. Little brief intro here for you. A little under the weather today, so my voice is more raspy than normal. Speaking of raspy, my next guest is Mr. Lewie Pugh, Executive VP, I think, of Owner-Operator Independent Driver Association, or amongst us truckers, just simply OOIDA. I recorded this better part of 2 months ago. As I said in my last podcast, I've been extremely busy. Family life, everything else, you know all the excuses. But Lewie very graciously gave me 45 minutes of his time. And we had a brief discussion on sort of his history with OOIDA, what they do, what they're not, projects they're working on. Had a couple little, back and forths on certain policy items. Lewie very graciously said he agreed with me 100% on almost everything I said. So, no arguments here. I think we're all on the same path. This is coming out after an interview I did with a driver from Hirschbach. Lewie and I wrapped it up mostly about autonomous trucks. So go back and listen to that recent interview. It'll be the last podcast out before this one, if you want to check out more information about that. Since I recorded this discussion with Lewie, Trump signed his executive order reinforcing English proficiency for commercial driver license holders in the United States. Pretty significant enforcement order, major ramifications for the trucking industry. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy held a ceremony down in Austin, Texas, where he signed off on paperwork on what the directions are going to be towards that reinforcement effort. And Lewie and OOIDA President Todd Spencer were both on hand, so I'll share some links to that in the show notes. And if you're not a member of OOIDA, maybe you'd consider signing up. They do a lot of good things for us. They are America's largest trucker advocacy organization. They just released a great white paper proving, after it's already been proved a whole bunch by myself and a number of other people, that the driver shortage narrative is bunkum. I think it just came out here not long after I recorded this podcast. They quoted me in it. They used my sort of little tweet zip file, which stipulates that the driver shortage narrative reinforces a system of stealth corporate welfare that markets itself as a jobs program to sort of, describe the fact that the taxpayer keeps throwing money at truck driving schools and nobody sticks around, high turnover rates, and that suppresses everybody's wages, puts an awful lot of unsafe truckers on the road, and it's bad for everybody except the people getting stuff moved cheap. And we have to move on from this paradigm of not paying American workers what they're actually worth and just pretending we can, go ever further into the bottom of the human resources barrel and just pay people nothing and expect them to take it and expect this economy to keep going. Speaking of autonomous trucks and pulling drivers out of them. All right, well, I won't keep you any longer. As always, head on over to my Substack, autonomoustruckers.substack.com. Smash that subscribe button. If you're listening on another podcast platform, share, like, subscribe, do the things. I don't advertise. I rely on you guys and your word of mouth to help spread the show. It's free. It's a gift for my fellow truck drivers. And likewise, Mr. Pugh gifted his time to me, which is to say he gifted it to you. All right. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, corrections, or hate mail, gordylocks@protonmail.com. And let's get to Mr. Lewie Pugh of OOIDA.
All right, good day, everybody. Welcome back to another fantastic episode of the Voice of Gord podcast. I'm Gord, and this is my voice. The other voice you're about to hear today, you've probably heard recently in the United States Congress, giving testimony and in various other places around the country as he does his level best to defend the American trucker in his capacity as, I believe, the executive VP of the Owner Operator Independent Drivers Association. So please give a warm welcome to the other voice you're about to hear, Mr. Lewie Pugh.
Hey, thanks for having me, Gord. It's a pleasure, and hope everybody out there is being safe and making a little bit of money.
Yeah, well, that's what it's all about. Everybody wants to get home to mama and have some barbecue chicken and pay the bills and have an enjoyable time going down the road while they're doing it. So for those who don't know, OOIDA is one of the oldest sort of independent trucker representing organizations in the country. They do a lot of work trying to deal with our friends in Washington, so to speak, and advocate on our behalf. And Louie's been working with them for a little while now. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your history in trucking, Lewie, and your history with OOIDA.
Yeah, my history in trucking. I mean, I've been in trucking my entire adult career. Other than I guess a little stint with Uncle Sam first, and that I was a truck driver there too. So, different kind, but it was still trucking. Grew up on a farm in southeastern Ohio. We had some trucks on the farm. My dad was a blacksmith, and he'd drive truck in the winter. And my grandfather was a farmer and drove milk trucks some. And so I've been around trucks pretty much my whole life. And as I tell people, I went to see Smokey and the Bandit when I was about 4 years old. And I wanted to be a trucker ever since then. And they left a lot out of that movie, though, I'll tell you.
What a great film.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But with that being said, I started driving truck on my 21st birthday. And back when I started, you either drove a yellow cab over or an orange cab over. And I chose to drive an orange cab over. And I worked there for about 9 months. And then I quit and went to work for a small business owner operator, had 5 trucks. And we worked for him for about 6 or 8 months. And then I bought my own truck. And I had my own truck until 2018. Came in the office here at OOIDA in 2017, but I kept my truck for a year or so because I wasn't sure how well I would be able to acclimate to driving a desk. And I still probably not acclimated, but I don't have to have an ELD at least. So that's why I went to a desk, I guess. But it's been a fun journey. I've been with OOIDA as a board of director for 21 years now. Joined OOIDA about a year after I started driving truck. An owner operator I was friends with told me you need to join these guys and get involved. And I listened to him and I did. And I was 31 when I got on the board and been on the board ever since. And then, like I said, in 17, I was asked if I'd want to come out here and learn how to work in the office and go to Washington, D.C. and talk to people. And so that's what I did. Trucking was good to me. So it's been a good career, a great career, and I hope I'm giving back to what it's given to me.
Right. And I think we have some similarities there. As you know, I'm working on a book about trucking, and I have my little podcast project and my various writings. Same thing. Trucking's been good to me. I've had a very interesting career out of it. Drove truck in 4 different countries. And
you've had a fascinating career, my friend. I'm a little envious of some of the stuff you've gotten to do, especially the Australian road train stuff. I just like to try it out just once. I just think it'd be cool.
Yeah, it's different. Trucking down under is a totally different ball game. But like I said, I think trucking can be a good thing, can be a good career, can be a good job. It's vital to the economy, and it's much more important than people give it credit for sometimes. OOIDA. So in my capacity, writing about the business and the sort of, normal media rather than trucking media, I come across a lot of people that like invoke the Teamsters and invoke labor organizing.
OOIDA is not that organization. So just for those people listening to this wondering about like what OOIDA does, can you give us a little breakdown and how it's separate from, say, a labor union?
Yeah, we're not a labor union and we can't call for strikes. For all them people who tell us, when you gonna make everybody strike? We can't do that. That's against the law.
Right.
So we'll get that out of the way. With that being said, OOIDA was founded in 1973. A group of truckers, and I think this is the thing that makes me the proudest of OOIDA and sets OOIDA apart. Group of truckers got together. Arab oil embargoes going on, lots of bad things going on. They decided they're going to go to Washington, D.C. and straighten it out. They got with Bob Dole over in Kansas side and went out to D.C. and met with him and did some talking and talked to lawmakers and come home and thought they'd go back to trucking and the world would be a better place. And here we are 51 years later, still fighting some of those same fights. But we're a membership organization. We were, like I said, we were founded by truckers. Our bylaws protect that institution. We're still that way today. As you know, I was a trucker, Todd Spencer, our president, and who's been here for almost since the beginning and helped build this place along with Jim Johnson. Todd was a trucker. Jim was a trucker. I have a board of directors who kind of guide and oversee our advocacy and oversee our organization. That either are actively driving or have come off the road or working in transportation or something. To get on the board in the first place, though, you have to be actively driving at the time and be an active trucker for 5 years, and you have to be a member for 5 years continuous. So, I mean, we know, I guess, maybe I should say, we know what truckers feel like because we've done it. We're coming from that place. That's what sets us apart from all these other organizations in Washington, D.C. We don't have, we've got lobbyists and I have staff around here that never drove a truck, of course, because they have to be experts in certain fields. But the people guiding the ship and running the ships and the final decision comes down to people who sat behind the wheel or are still sitting behind the wheel this day. And again, that makes us different. And we're great, luckily, because our membership has grown from a 12 or 13 guys in a little camper in a truck stop parking lot. We now have 150,000 members. We have a little over 250 employees now here in Grain Valley, where we started. We've grown the organization. We've become a big player at the table in Washington, D.C. We're a thorn in the sides of ATA and some of the other ones. And, it used to be we were just sort of the thorn and we were kind of on the table a lot of times, but now we're at the table. And that goes, a lot of that credit goes to Todd Spencer and Jim and building it. But Todd, he really built our government affairs out for us in our magazine. And, and it goes to our members because, everything OOIDA does, at the end of the day, it comes down to our membership and grassroots. Because just like a couple of weeks ago when you and I were talking at the truck show, I can go to Congress and I can testify and I can tell the problems that our members are facing and how they're on. That puts the ball on the field. The way you move the ball down the field and score a touchdown is when members pick up the phone and get involved and call their lawmakers and tell them, and that drives the ball toward the way we want, or keeps the ball from being driven, however you want to look at it, depending on if they don't call. So, the advocacy, we can do so much, but grassroots is what we are. We're a grassroots organization, just like NRA and some of these other organizations out there. So it takes us all, and it takes everybody in this building, but it takes every member out there on the road and trucking to make this all work. And that's why we've been so successful, is not only the leadership of the association, our board, but just the membership, our members. I can't thank our membership enough for the successfulness of our organization.
Right. You mentioned that your board of directors is composed of drivers, former drivers, people who've had experience. One of the critiques I've had of the sort of labor movement as it exists in 2025, and as I came to discover when none of them supported the Freedom Convoy in Canada and started talking to people more familiar with labor unions, is that labor unions no longer draw their leadership from the shop floor often enough. They have become what they call professionalized.
So the people who actually lead the labor unions are often from the same sort of class or caste of people that they're supposed to be fighting against, the managers, corporations. Everyone has to have a pedigree or a degree of some sort. I'm I'm 8 miles away from Cornell University here in Ithaca, which has a very substantial school strictly about that, the Industrial Labor Relations School. And they train people to be union leaders rather than, hey, you that's been working here for 5 years, what do you think? You should come run the joint, right? Like, we're not in the days of Jimmy Hoffa anymore. As far as the advocacy stuff goes, um, what so yeah, a lot of problems in trucking, not all, but some come down to sort of how it's regulated. OOIDA had this big push a little while back called Knockout Bad Regs. So there's this question about what regulations are good, which are not, which are really bad, what are some that could use some adjustment or be focused in a more correct fashion. Maybe you could tell us some stuff OOIDA is working on at the moment in order to try and help us out here.
Yeah, and I just want to go back to what you said, Gordon. You're so correct, though, on a lot of it. A lot of these places have left us behind because you're right. They're not taking people who have the experience. They are just training people to be mouthpieces. And, as I'm sure you've learned, I'm far from polished. I'm a kid with a vocational school education, just lucky to get out of high school. I'm freaking amazed that I get to go do what I get to do. But it does make a difference. And, and this is what I try to tell truckers is don't be afraid to call your lawmakers and reach out. They want to hear from you because they hear bullshit lobbyist stuff every day, and it's a fresh of breath air. So, that's where truckers sometimes I feel like they almost intimidated by it, and you shouldn't be. You're an expert in your field. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick because you brought up a wonderful point, Gordon. But yeah, what we're working on now, and I mean, it seems like it's the age-old thing I'll start off with is truck parking. It's at a crisis level. I've been in this industry for 30 years now, and it's just continually gotten worse. And we're at one spot for every 11 trucks. As I tell these people in Washington and other places, you give plenty of money to law enforcement to write truckers violations for not parking it when they're supposed to or parking somewhere illegally. Why can't you pony up some money to give them a safe place to rest? Because that's what this is all about, safety. We want highway safety. We want it for truckers. We want it for our families. We want it for people driving down the road. And safety starts in a lot of places, but one of the main places it starts is getting a good night's sleep every night and not having to worry about a place to park. Plus, it's a much bigger thing that they're missing because truckers forget that, or I shouldn't say truckers forget, lawmakers and folks forget that the parking problem leads into congestion and all these other things that they don't even think about because what truckers are doing now is they're shutting down sooner. They don't drive as long as they could. So that hurts their economy, but it also creates more need of more trucks because we're not getting the full amount out of each driver. And it's not the driver's fault. He just wants a safe place to get a rest, which he should get. So parking, of course, with the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act, that would actually set aside funds that have to go toward parking because the problem comes down to every time is that states have so much money in their basket. They can spend that money to build some parking. They can spend that money to fix some roads, or put some bridges, or put some of them pretty walls up along the highway, or plant some flowers, or some bicycle trails, or whatever. Everybody's got their damn hands out in the money, but parking ain't sexy. And that's why the parking isn't sexy. We have this whole NIMBY effect in America. People don't want trucks in their back. They want their Amazon and they want their lumber, but they don't want the trucks. Well, you can't have it both ways. So that's why we want to make a set aside money that money has to be spent for parking. And states can't say they don't have the money to do it because it's there. So that's one thing we're working on. Excuse me, I need to take a quick drink.
Sure. You sound like you got a scratchier voice than I do today, sir. You've been at it.
I've had a cold for 3 weeks, buddy. I'm finally getting over it. But yeah, it's getting over. Yeah. So with that being said, another thing we're working on is removing, and I think this is a big thing in trucking, removing the overtime exemption in the Fair Labor Standards Act. That's called the Got Trucker Act. since 1938, truckers have been exempted from overtime. And of course, the story's always been, we don't know where that trucker's at. Is he driving? Is he sleeping? Is he down at the truck stop flirting with Millie the waitress? We don't know what this old boy's doing. So we can't pay him overtime. Oh my God, that'd be terrible. Well, guess what, big carrier? Y'all wanted your ELDs and you got them. Even though I'd have fought them, you got them. Now we know where the trucker is. We know if he's flirting with Millie. We know if he's driving. We know if he's we know everything he's doing. So now there's no reason not to pay him. There
Right.
should have never been a reason ever.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I remember when they were trying to sell ELDs before the legislation passed in 2017 and it became law. That was the selling feature. Like even the ATA guys came out and said, look, we're going to be able to collate and assemble all this data about where trucks are, and then we'll be able to crunch the numbers on detention and be able to like present that to shippers and receivers and make sure you guys get paid, and this is going to improve everything. And then none of that happened. They just got their data and kept on going. They only used it for punishment purposes, not for compensation purposes.
Funny how that works, ain't it? You know, funny how that works. But you're right. And you know, people forget out here that truckers work 70 to 80 hours a week. They don't work there ain't no trucker working 40-hour weeks. You know, there isn't. It's a 70, 80-hour plus week job. Every professional blue collar job gets paid time and a half, except for trucking. And why shouldn't a truck driver? And you know, again, it comes back to safety. Pay people for what they do. There's no reason why an employee driver, when he pulls into a loading dock, he shouldn't go on the clock and get paid for that. Or when he's getting fuel. I mean, I don't know why we're in an industry who thinks you should do all this shit for free. And that's been, and I hate to say it, but it's truckers' own faults too. And it's amazing to me how many truckers we put out, of course, on social media that got trucker. How many truck drivers are complaining that we're fighting for this? They don't want the government involved in their pay. They don't want the government getting on.
Well,
the government is involved in your pay.
I know. Well, here's the thing. So my argument to these guys, and I've seen that too, I have written a number of articles in defense of the GOT Act in Newsweek and the American Conservative on my own Substack, because I think it's a good idea because it addresses a number of issues. But this weird pushback thing from truckers themselves you're talking about is very interesting because I think there's like a cultural tendency amongst truckers to like lean politically conservative, and they don't believe the government does anything right, and they have good reason and justification to hold those views. That's fine. But the GOT Act is one line to remove an exemption. How it looks after that line is removed, how they decide to figure out how to pay you, how all that stuff happens is up to the companies. It's not up to the government. They're just removing the exemption. This is not like a new tax. This is not a new regulation. This is like, hey, you guys have to figure this out now under the law. Here you go. Up to you. This is not a new regulation, right? Like, and it's hard to get that into people because they believe everything the government does is always bad. It's always some new thing. Well, actually, what they're doing is they're stopping a thing. And then we have to work together in the market to figure that out amongst ourselves, which is supposed to be the sort of American ideal, right?
100%. You're right on the money, buddy. I mean, if you want to be mad at the government meddling in trucking, you should be mad that this regulation exists in the first place, not that we want to get rid of it. You know, it's crazy to me, but, you know, and not only do I think it, you know, not only do we know that will help get drivers paid better, but it should have a trickle down effect and help even small business guys like I was and others, because that's the other pushback. Well, how does this help me? Well, it should have a trickle down effect because whether we like it or not, big carriers set the barometer in marketplace for rates and what you can do and contracts, all this other stuff. So with that being said, you know, when it comes to detention, you know, big guys don't charge for it because it doesn't cost them anything hardly. So little guys can't get it. Or they sit there, and granted, you have to figure a rate. You have to figure in a realistic amount of time to unload or load what you're hauling when you figure the rate. But when it goes over that, you should get paid. And that's the thing. if the big fleets have to start paying time and a half, and drivers aren't giving their time away at the load docks, employee drivers, then the big carriers are going to have to either put pressure on the shippers and receivers to load and unload the damn trucks, or they're going to have to charge them. And if they do it, then you'll get to do it as a little guy.
Yeah, it's the rising tide lifts all boats. And
Yep.
I want to speak to something you mentioned about truck parking. Like, all of these problems are interconnected, right?
100%.
And there was a really good study done by this guy named David Carell, who is I can't remember what his title is, but anyway, he works for MIT, or he did. Now he has a job with the government. He works for the United States DOT. I'm hoping to get him on my show. I'm waiting for some thoughts from him about how he's going to talk, because he's now a government employee and he's restricted in what he can say. But anyway, he did this study in 2021 at a subdivision of MIT called MIT Freight Labs. And it was he basically came to the conclusion that the United States trucking industry does not have a driver shortage problem so much as it has a capacity usage efficiency problem, right? So he studied all of these, detention reports and mileage and hours of service, and he came to this average that said, on average, American truck drivers actually only drive 6.5 hours a day. Now, that's an average. It might have got forced down by like local guys, who wait, and regional guys that wait at docks, and then your long haul guys bring the average up because they're driving all day long. But what he found is that, like, in the way he described it, was that 40% of America's trucking capacity is being left on the table every day because of detention. And he basically said, like, if you deal with this, you need less trucks because there's more of them being used more efficiently. The drivers are happier because, you're paying them by the mile and they're not sitting waiting around. When you have less trucks, you have less requirements for parking. There's just all of these positives downstream from more effective utilization of the capacity of the truck and the driver himself with his hours of service. And the Biden White House quoted it in this trucking action plan that they put out in 2021. And then instead of actually listening to what the guy's suggestions were, they did the exact opposite. They did the ATA thing. We need more drivers, rather than fix the system so the drivers you have are actually moving.
You're 100% correct. I say that all the time. The parking, if shippers have to start loading and unloading trucks like they should, where the trucker can actually run out here and drive and do what he wants to do. He doesn't want to sit at your damn loading dock. He wants to drive. If he could get here and drive, we would need so many less trucks on the road, and there'd be so much less truck traffic and so much less truck congestion. It would blow your mind. And again, it would help the parking problem because we wouldn't need as many trucks. You're right. It's this terrible snowball race to the bottom effect. And I say all the time that our freight movement in trucking is so inefficient. People don't realize it's probably one of the most inefficient things there is in the world. But the American trucker looks like it moves flawless. If it wasn't for the man and woman behind the wheel who give up, do without, probably run sometimes when they shouldn't, and all these things, nothing would get anywhere. But they make up for all the inefficiencies. I mean, I still remember during COVID, the line out there at LA Long Beach, and I don't know how many radios and TV shows and all this crap we did about how we need all these more trucks. And I'm like, you don't need more trucks. You need LA Long Beach to load the trucks they got. If you put more trucks out there, the line's 5 miles long instead of 2 miles long.
Yeah, there was a similar one here. I live about, as the crow flies, 45 miles away from one of the biggest paper mills in the United States, down in, I think it's Mashopin, or that's another town here in the northern Pennsylvania. And it's a paper mill. Mahoopney, that's it. And
I'm in that paper mill.
Yeah, it's Procter and Gamble plant, and it's one of the largest toilet paper and paper towel producing facilities on planet Earth. And at the beginning of COVID, when everyone was like, "Oh man, they're going to shut everything down," and everyone's out there panic buying. There was this really famous viral photo that went crazy of like this one intersection where the trucks have to turn in to get Mahoopney, and I think it might have been US Route 6, and like right off into the distance, just this huge line of trucks. Um, I can't, I don't know what was going on at that plant, but the demand surge collided with the capacity to load and unload trucks and get them moving and produce these huge backlogs all over the place.
Well, Gordon, I can tell you 30 years ago when I drove an orange cab over, I used to load out of there a lot because I lived in Ohio, and I sat there for hours and hours and sometimes a couple of days waiting to get loaded. So
Oh,
that's
wow.
30 years ago. Maybe they changed.
Wow, that's crazy. Another little factoid about that paper mill in Mahoopney is a lot of their pulp and fiber that they get is actually imported. No, they get train loads of like eucalyptus from New Zealand and Australia, like that's been like processed, and then they make diapers and paper towels and toilet paper out of it. It's the whole worldwide logistics system is like insane on some level, but it also depends on us, which is why your guys' work I think is so important, because like everyone forgets about this most critical aspect of it is the dude driving the truck to make all this stuff happen.
Exactly. And again, if it wasn't for them, the whole America would fold. If we left all this movement to the shippers, the receivers, and the big trucking execs, it would fold because it's just a total inefficient, stupid system. When people sit there and argue to me, it just blows my mind when we hear people say, well, we care about our drivers and we care about them, but we don't want to pay them overtime because we're setting up a thing for trial attorneys. How? The only way you're going to get sued is if you don't pay them like you're supposed to. So it's total insanity.
Yeah, I think they were giving away the game. I remember the comment you're referencing was from the ATA when the GOT Act was first introduced to Congress, and they suggested that we don't need it. Drivers have tons of choice, and all of this is a giveaway to labor attorneys. And I thought, well, there's only going to be labor attorneys if you don't pay.
Right. It's the same with their whole driver shortage bullshit. You got a 90% turnover rate in your industry, but yet or better, but you have a shortage. You're turning away. Now they're saying they turn away 90% of their applicants because of drugs or other problems. They're not okay. If you've got that many people coming in, how do you have a shortage? You don't have there's no way. And then another little fun fact, our foundation here at OOIDA just came up with a paper I think Friday. I just heard about it, read it Monday. Of new CDLs right now, or holders, people who've gotten CDLs in the last 5 years, there's 3 CDL holders for every 1 job. So showing how many people have left this industry, and right. they feel like that's on a conservative level. At least 3 CDL holders for every 1 job in trucking right now.
Yeah, that matches other people's research into it. I've been helping these guys, American Truckers United down in Arkansas. There was these other guys called CDLDU, and they had some interns look into this stuff. And all of the numbers show, even the ATA in 2019, they put out a paper, and in one of the footnotes, you sort of had to squint to read it. They admitted that there was 10 million existing CDLs at that time, and only roughly 2.2 to 2.5 million truck driving jobs. So it's like, where's this shortage? There's people around. You just haven't done anything to fix the business to make people want to stay.
Even Snyder said at an ATA thing last spring, we don't have any problem getting truckers right now.
Right. So let's move on from the driver shortage. What other legislation or suggestions or issues is OOIDA working on?
Yeah, some other legislation we're working on, of course, is the bathroom bill. Since COVID, truckers have been denied restroom access, which is crazy to me. Here in the greatest country in the world, that we have to argue about using and make a law to use the bathroom, but that's where we are. So there's that bill. We should be seeing a bill coming out for this speed limiters again to defund that. We think that the Trump administration is probably going to roll it back like they did before anyway. But we'd really like to get this bill passed that takes the funding, because that's like the final nail in the coffin. If Congress can defund it, and then we don't have to worry about it coming back in 3 or 4 years, hopefully. It'd take a congressional mandate to do that, and that's a lot harder to get done than a petition with FMCSA. So there's that. Of course, we're coming into the new highway bill. We, of course, would like to see much stronger training, entry-level driver training. We want to see increased. We'd like to see behind the wheel time. We'd like to see the barrier of entry, not only as a truck driver, but to become a motor carrier, be raised way high, because it's way too easy. As I remind lawmakers, I can go out and get a hobo off the street, and I can get him a CDL and make him a full-blown motor carrier in a month and a half. And how's that safe? How does that help anybody? That's probably the first and foremost is training. Train these people. We got to train people how to do it. We have to start investing in truckers and putting people over profits. And for 40 years, we haven't been doing that. And we're paying the price.
Yeah, it's investing in humans in general.
Exactly.
I actually just earlier today I interviewed the gentleman who owns and operates one of the oldest truck driving schools in Canada out in British Columbia, well renowned for teaching people how to navigate the Rocky Mountains, chaining up, getting up and down hills. Good guy. And this issue of like the training and respect for people and their time and for what they're doing. Another issue you just raised is the sort of like freight fraud stuff with motor carrier numbers. It's just bizarre to me that we allow brokerages that are not here in the United States to operate here, extract that wealth, and then do their thing over the internet with no regard for the sort of culture of trucking here, the needs and sort of financial well-being of drivers here. And my friend Justin, he used to work at Freightwaves. He has this great idea for legislation, which is all load brokers should have to have a TWIC card, which then means biometric data, scanning your arm, your hands, like everybody that works at the port. It's called the Transportation Worker Identification Credential, I think.
Yeah.
And if brokers had to have those, it eliminates all the guys overseas. And then because the freight fraud issue is mostly tied to them, it also takes care of that. What do you think about trying to push forward legislation in that regard? Do you think that's possible?
Well, there is legislation out there now with that, and it's that Holmes Norton got out there, and it'll make brokers have to have a physical address in the United States. So that's a first step.
Not just a post office box.
Not just a post office box. Just like a motor carrier has to have a physical address, they'll have to have a physical address as well, because you're right. We see they either have post office boxes, UPS boxes. I mean, we see some of them, like 8 or 10 of them sharing the same address, stuff like that. So some of that stuff, that should get squared out now. If FMCSA watches it, I mean, that's always the other question, watches, enforces, and making sure you're doing it right. The TWIC card idea is a great idea. The only thing about the TWIC card is a lot of ports never even got these readers or these biometric things even in place. You just flash your card. I mean, I know me, I just flash my card and away you go. I didn't even look at it. So if it was enforced correctly, it would probably work. And I mean, that's the pushback we hear from our members. Why don't I even get this stupid TWIC card? I can do the same thing with my driver's license and save an extra $100. And they're right, because they're not using the TWIC card, isn't being used the way it was designed. And that's what happens so much. We come up with these great ideas, and then they only half-ass do them. And it just becomes another expense on the driver, or another step the driver has to go through, and it never really solves anything. But yeah, but agree. And of course, going from that, we've petitioned CVSA, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, for this whole non-English speaking problem, which is part of this as well, because they took that out of service in 2015. Their reasoning was back then truckers, it was talking to enforcement, and that they could do it through translating services on their phone, and it wasn't intimate danger. We are arguing the fact they can talk to law enforcement. What about reading signs? Because we hear all the time where they're missing signs, not being able to read signs. I know Maryland complains on the Bay Bridge. They'll put the signs out for empty trucks not to cross in high winds, and then they're catching guys doing it, and they can't speak the language, they can't read. So that's where we're coming from, and that's what we petitioned for. And we'll be at CVSA, of course, the end of April. So hopefully that'll have a good outcome. I know there's a lot of law enforcement that's supporting this as well. We're also trying to figure out, and I brought this up in my hearing a couple weeks ago, who's getting non-domicile CLs, who's keeping track of them, how many of them are there, same with these B1 visas, because what we're finding out is nobody knows. We're just handing these things out like candy, and who's got them? And, I remind people all the time, truckers haul everything from, plastic bottles to bombs. So it's probably a real good idea to know who's behind the wheel of the truck, because there are people from other countries who don't like us and would like to do harm to us.
Right. Well, there's the security thing, and then there's also, as I mentioned to this gentleman from BC earlier today, there's the culture thing, right? Like, the highway is a public space, and it's a space of interaction. It's a space where we all need to cooperate, and there's a sort of unique driving culture to America. There are people who like to complain about bad drivers. People in New Jersey are bad drivers. People in Florida are bad drivers. Everybody likes to complain about that. But if you actually look at the statistics, we're actually pretty safe. There's like a car guy website called Jalopnik that cited a National Highway Traffic Safety Association study that showed, for all the miles traveled, we have something like 99.9999%, 4 decimal points, safe miles traveled. And if you wanted to bring in automated vehicles and trucks, they have to get to another decimal point to justify it on safety grounds. We actually, despite all the accidents and stuff, when you look at it by this metric, we're actually pretty safe. And we sort of have this convivial and cooperative culture. You get to a intersection, it's ambiguous who has the right of way. Maybe you wave people through. You flash the lights when people pass. Some guy's trying to get into a driveway, and you sort of slow down and wave them in, and you try and help fellow motorists out. And if you're not from this country and didn't grow up here and didn't spend a lot of time on the roads here as a kid, you don't know that at all. So never mind the language thing. There's this cultural training thing.
I think it goes from driving just clear down into common daily courtesy, holding the door and stuff like that with her, because they're not from here. It's just how we are. We hold the door for each other. Like you said, try to help each other out. I feel like our society, unfortunately, has lost some of that since COVID, which really irritates me. But hopefully we'll get back to it. But you're right. And, I don't begrudge anybody trying to make a living wherever you're from. I get it. We all came from somewhere else, and people coming and trying to better themselves, I begrudge no one. But you need to do it the right way. You need to do it safely. And the problem we have, unfortunately, is we're bringing people in here to drive trucks that come from a country where they're lucky to get a sandwich once a day or have clothes. So they come over here, and people are taking advantage of them, is what's happening. They give them a truck. They make them go out here and work. These people have enough money to eat, have a warm place to sleep, and some clothes to buy, and they can send some money home, and they're happy because that they've never had anything like that. They're not like us that want to grow up.
Yeah, different set of standards.
Different set of standards, and unfortunately, the people that are bringing them in here, again, I go back, are taking advantage of these people. Bring them in here. And if they do something wrong, then they send them back. They go to jail, whatever. Just like that kid who ran off the cliff in Colorado a couple years ago and killed them people. You know, he's a victim of everything that's wrong in our industry as far as I'm concerned. But with that all being said, bring these people over here, train them, teach them our language, let them get jobs that way. I don't got a problem with it. But let's bring them up. Instead, we're bringing the whole damn industry down. And when you bring our industry down, what happens is people die out here on the highway. Our families, our friends, other truckers, and that ain't good for nobody or fair to anybody. We need, again, I go back to what we were talking about with overtime and training and all that. We need to invest in the drivers. Quit putting profits over people.
Right. It sounds it sounds very Bernie Sanders-esque.
I don't know about all that, but
Yeah, no. Well, no, I think
you're right, though.
one of the funny things about, you're doing this with OOIDA and I'm doing this in my writing is we're trying to advocate for improvement to something. And I don't think it should be coded as like left wing or right wing in this
No.
silly bipolar thing. It's about material reality, everybody getting home safely, people being able to make a buck, and the whole thing working. And clearly it's not.
And you're right. And, you know, we've gotten to this stalemate in America in the last few years where everything's Democrat, Republican, bipartisan. OOIDA are not bipartisan, but, you know, OOIDA is a bipartisan organization. I'm here to tell you, I have my own political personal views, but I can tell you what, there's good people for trucking in America on both sides of the aisle. And there's bad people. And you can't just watch freaking CNN or Fox or these kind of places because they're playing to a base. That's what they're doing. You get some of the news, some of the stories straight, some of the stories not. But again, we got to work with both sides of the house to make this work. And and you're right, it's got to it's got to be what's best for America. And when it comes down to trucking, it's got to be what's best for trucking and what's best for truck drivers. And sometimes what's good for trucking as a whole isn't necessarily good for you as a truck driver, because maybe you're over here in this little niche and you don't want us messing with this. But it's for the greater good of trucking is what we gotta quit looking for the greater good of ourselves all the time and looking for the greater good of everybody.
Right, yeah, because we're all going down the same roads and we all exposed to the same risks. And like you say, at the end of the day, we all want to go home to mama and earn a buck. And
the thing I missed the most of being on the road, it was the brotherhood of being on the road. And I read a little story about this in Landline a couple months ago. I missed my friend, my buddies I trucked with, and talked about that. And you know, when I went out on social media, there ain't no brotherhood on the road and blah, 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 anymore. And again, it gets back, we got to quit being so damn negative. You know, quit hating the guy in the truck beside us. We got to reach out and help. I mean, I remember when I started, I didn't know, I was a dumb kid. I didn't know shit. And older guys helped me. And I don't feel like we do that as much as we used to. You know, and I tried to do that when I trucked. If somebody would come and ask for my help, I would try to show them and stuff. But that's what we need to get back to, that and that brotherhood of trucking. And I miss it. That's the thing I miss the most. I enjoy going to mats because I see my old friends. I see guys I used to work with, truck with. I meet new friends, new truckers, tell new stories. You know, that's this is a great occupation. If you can dig through the bullshit, trucking is a wonderful, freedom, great occupation, you know, and it's a shame that we've got so many people out there working against it and not wanting to help it. And my hat's off to you, because I think you feel about the same way I do. And you put that in your writing and you talk about that, and that's good. And we need more of that.
Right. Happy to help. So back to the legislation. You gave a bit of a barn burner of a how do I put? I don't want to call it a speech, but you were asked to testify in Congress again here at the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee a couple of weeks ago, right before Matt's actually. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what's going on, and where do you think those efforts are going to lead?
Well, yeah, we testified in House TNI, Transportation Infrastructure Committee, just for people. That's where most trucking legislation lives and dies. We're getting ready to start the highway bill, which comes out every 5 or 6 years. So this first hearing was mainly about, was kind of what we wanted, state of trucking, what we'd like to see. There was myself, someone from truckload carriers, a gentleman from the Teamsters, a gentleman representing shippers and receivers, and a gentleman representing Farm Bureau. Talked about a lot of things that we've talked about already: parking, pay, restroom access, and some of these kind of training, lots of training. Also, got into weights, size and weights. Of course, shippers and receivers, they want you to haul more. Truckers, not so much. And so that was kind of a contentious issue. I did find it interesting that me, the guy from truckload carriers, the guy from Teamsters, Congressman Bost, who comes from a trucking family, drove truck, worked from a trucking family, and Congressman Collins, who from Georgia, who also has a trucking company and trucking family, all five of us agreed raising and increasing size and weights of trucks is bad for trucking and bad for truckers. The only people it helps is shippers. But buddy, the people in the shipping and the people in the ag were like, oh no, it's great for everybody.
Well, if it's done correctly, right? So like I don't want to say that I hold the same views as the shippers or the ag guys, but like there's efficiency concerns, right? And I come from Canada originally, and we have Super B trains. So for bulk commodities, the more you move with less trucks, the more efficient the system is. I was in Australia, I drove road trains. New Zealand has higher weight limits. You're getting more moved for less truck. I understand OOIDA's concerns about like the government in America is corrupt, and if there's going to be any legislation to make an increase happen, it'll probably favor the megas. I don't know that there's that. I don't know that there's enough well-trained guys you can start doing that. That's another conversation about training, but it is more efficient. And all of the jobs that I got paid the most in my life was when I was in Australia pulling road trains and when I was doing Super Bs in Canada. So if it's managed correctly and the truck is being paid correctly and the driver's being paid correctly, maybe not such a bad idea. The problem is that these, perhaps the shippers and the farm ag guys don't have that mentality. They're not worried about paying us more. They just want more stuff moved for cheap. So that's the sort of tension there, right?
That's a complete tension. And, like I said, I understand what you're saying as far as Australia and Canada. I mean, I've seen B trains where I'm from Ohio. B trains run steel to Michigan and all that stuff, and up into Canada. So I'm familiar with the problem that we see here. For one, what they're wanting is they want a one size fits all rule. They want to add one more axle. You got to go out here and buy a new truck or new trailer because you got to put another axle under it. And then they want everybody to haul 91 or 92,000. That's what they're wanting. So everybody. And as I brought up, when you get into general road freight, mass majority of these trucks out here, they're not even running gross weight.
No, they're hauling plastic bottles and toilet paper.
Yeah, they're cubing out before they're grossing out.
Right.
So this is a problem and a solution in search of a problem. The other problem comes back to what you said is pay. Home Depot, in a hearing in January or February of this year, asking for the same things, was asked, will you pay more for the freight to be hauled if they would increase the weight? Home Depot said no, they will not.
They want they want it for free. That's no good.
That's the problem. And let's be realistic. At the end of the day, you're right. If all the things, the stars would align, it'd probably be okay. But we can't even get them to pay truckers overtime without this huge ass fight,
Right.
So to be realistic, and that's the problem. I myself have experience hauling steel. I go back to Worthington Steel down by Cincinnati. Used to load there, go to Columbus. It paid like 60 cents 100 or some shit back in the day. When they come out with the permit, you could haul 110,000, I think, on 5 axles. You buy this $55 permit, it's good for a year. Well, first it was paying like 70 cents a hundred. So this is great. We're going home more weight, making 10 cents a hundred. In about 6 months' time, Worthington cut the rate to 50 cents a hundred on a permit load, 60 cents a hundred on a legal load. So I said, screw you and your freaking permit loads. I'll haul legal loads.
Yeah, they want all the benefit without the cost.
So, and that is
really
how I was concerned, and that's what we hear all the time. And when you have national shippers out there saying, we ain't going to pay them no more. And when we've researched our drivers, of course, they say about 68% say they don't want to haul heavier. They have no desire. They find it make their job harder, more stressful, and don't want to deal with it. I think there's a good argument that we have a very crumbling infrastructure already in this country. Adding more weight, I mean, look at Michigan. It's just going to make it worse. We don't have the money to fix what we got now. So I think we better stick with 80,000.
One last question. I know we're approaching a hard out here. What are your thoughts on automated trucks? One of the things I talk about is the implementation of driverless truck technology. What is your or OOIDA's position on that, such as you've developed one?
Well, I think with all these brokers over in wherever in foreign countries, the only thing will make out better is we always autonomous trucks. You know, these foreign brokers can have driverless trucks driving around. World will be safer, and we'll all be singing Kumbaya. And Gordon, I guess me and you go fish all the time.
Yeah, but how are we going to pay our bills?
Yeah.
How is this whole thing going to keep working?
Government's going to keep us, I guess. No, we are so skeptical. I think autonomous trucks are a solution in search of a problem as well. This shit's being sold because of the driver shortage that we don't have. You know, do I think there's places in this world that if they ever get this stuff fixed that it could probably do? Maybe. Do I think it's going to replace trucking? No. Do I think it's going to replace a driver? No. Maybe 100 years from now, but not in my lifetime. Probably not in my nephew's lifetime because I don't got no kids. But with that being said, we're very, very concerned from a safety level, number one. When you tell me you're 93% ready to go, 7% can kill a lot of people on the highway.
Right. Yeah.
Also very concerned domestic terrorism. Why? Because somebody can hack into these things. Cybersecurity. Why? Nobody wants to answer these questions. Had a meeting with some engineers. I'm not going to name the carrier company, but had a meeting with some of the engineers a few weeks ago. Brought up some of these concerns. They sort of patted me on top of the head and said, "It's okay, Mr. Truck Driver. We've got this handled. We much more about trucking than you do."
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
When you come into it with that attitude, that's alarm bells.
And you know what, Gordon? I don't claim to be a computer guy. I'm proud that I'm able to figure out how to get on Zoom and talk to you. Computers ain't my thing. I'm a mechanical guy. I'm a truck guy. I'm not a computer guy. But with that being said, I have asked and asked and asked all these companies, come give me a shot. Let me take a ride. I have to talk about this stuff all the time. I would like to talk about something that I'm educated about, not just my opinions. You know, show it to me. And I find it fascinating that no one will take me up on that. Okay. And, you know, I just want to see the trucking part of it. You can talk to me about how these things work and all this. You might as well be telling me Greek theology because I don't know what you're talking about. But let me show me how it goes down the road. So, and I point back to the fact is my iPhone 14 struggles some days to connect to the sync system in my 2022 F350. Now that seems to me, I'm not a technology guy, but that should be pretty basic. We've been doing that for a long time now, and that doesn't work all the time. So you're telling me that this semi is going to run up and down the road with no problems and stay connected? Like I said, I've got lots of questions, lots of concerns. No one can seem to answer it. And and when you won't even let me take a ride in your truck, that tells me that there's something you don't really want to show me. That's my opinion.
Right. No, and it's good to remain skeptical of all this. All right, Lewie, I know you got to bounce here in a couple minutes. Any final thoughts for everybody?
I just want to say thanks for being on your show. And most importantly, thanks to all the men and women out there on the road driving truck. This country would be nowhere without you. You know, I say it all the time. We got our first responders out there in this country and our military, and right behind them is every man and woman who drives a truck, because none of those people would have the things they need to do their job if it wasn't for the truckers. So thanks for what you do out there, truckers, and be safe. And as Gord said, I hope you make it home safe to mama or papa or whoever, and have a great time out there. Thank you for what you do.
All right, great way to end it. Thank you very much, Mr. Pugh, and way of the road.